Greetings and welcome to part 3 of our message from Hebrews. That chapter 12, verses 1 and 2. Let us run with endurance this race set before us, looking at Jesus, the author and finisher of our faith. And in part 1, we talked about the starting block. We talked about direction. In part 2, we talked about the timing clock. We talked about discipline. Today I want to finish on the anchor, which is the finishing stop. And we're talking here about disposition. Remember, we're still supposed to look at Jesus, who gives us endurance at this time. And we are in a very strange race, but we know who started it. We know who will finish it. We know who will uphold us during this time. Because He is not expecting us to do something new. He created it all. And He's saying, I just need you to be comfortable within my creation and not get confused amidst the chaos. Look unto me, the author and finisher of your faith. We've given you different illustrations of the backdrop of the country of Albania where I found this new race. I found myself unsettled during this time. And today I want to finish up with one of the miracles that took place in that beautiful city. You see, before we left, my host said, you can't come this far and leave without meeting the people who work so hard. So we're going to go to a dinner. This was the night before I was scheduled to leave. I had my airline tickets now all organized. I was scheduled to leave there. I was still a little nervous about the fact that I would have to go through London. I did not understand what the quarantine measures were back home in the United States. They got a little more severe about 2 days after I landed. There were long lines in the airport trying to get out. Even in London, I managed to go through, spend the night there, and leave the next morning. We had already made the decision that we would self-quarantine ourselves because we did not know what would have happened to us, so we decided to come back and be in isolation. So this is the race we're running right now. But let me remind you of something that took place, and maybe it will uplift your heart as you watch this. As you watch all three, go back and watch part 1, part 2, and part 3. So we're still looking at Jesus, the author and finisher of our faith. We're looking ahead at this race. And in Albania, my host Jensi said, why don't you, let's go to Tirana, the capital city. Over there, we'll meet the folks who work very hard to organize these meetings. And folks, my ego was pretty high when I got to Albania because some of these meetings they organized were fairly high-level meetings. You know, at that precise moment, I felt like someone above my calling. Humility is a very interesting thing, according to Fred Smith. Humility is not thinking less of yourself, it's thinking less often of yourself. And maybe that's what I should have done. Sometimes in our journey, we get angry because we feel we are the Marthas of this world. We are serving, and we are scoffing the Marys of this world who are sitting at Jesus' feet and just receiving. You know, sometimes when you look at this race, we maybe have to become people who in this isolation have to get at Jesus' feet and say, Lord, Master, let me just receive from you the guidance on how to run this race. That's what endurance is, looking at Him. So in Albania, we go to that dinner, and that dinner was great. We had a good time. We laughed a little. We cried a little. We shared a little. And of course, we could not do the obligatory hugs or the handshakes, so we did the fist bumps. And somewhere between there and the parking lot, which was about 1 kilometer away, I managed to lose my identity, my passport. I'd traveled 30 years and managed to protect it, but here, I'd lost it. I came back when I discovered that about an hour later in my hotel, which was about 40 kilometers away. I turned that room upside down. I ransacked it. I was on my knees. My earthly identity was now gone. I was clinging to my heavenly identity. I said, Lord, don't strand me here. You brought me here. And I was questioning why all this was happening. The messages and the missives from across the WhatsApp groups were not comforting. Everybody was telling me it would be okay, but I didn't have my earthly identity. Suddenly I called my bride and I told her the mistake I had made, and she tried to make me hold it together because she knew that it was a dire situation. Needless to say, in my passport is her name. Someone found my passport and the holder on the side of the road. They managed to locate her name via the internet, I guess, and they tried to communicate with her in Albanian. That did not work. A short while later, she gets a call from someone in Boston. The cousin of the man who found my passport says to her, don't worry, we have your husband's passport. Tell him not to worry. We're good people. And I thought, why mention the word good to someone in turmoil, to someone in angst, to someone in hurt? When the disciples said, "Good teacher," he says, "Why do you call me good?" As Christians, we like the word good because it represents the opposite of bad. We like the word right because we know it conquers wrong. We like the word white versus black. About 40 minutes, 45 minutes, an hour later, I don't know, the time stood still in this race. My disposition was just to him. Gensi and I talked about how God had miraculously created a miracle. Even in my phone, those two people whose only first names I know are mentioned as Albanian angels. In an unorthodox time, in an unforgettable place, at an unforeseen moment, God reveals himself to me, because when I get back to my hotel room, I now am on my knees in prayer to my Lord, thanking him for the miracle he delivered, and his words of assurance to me are the words of assurance I'll give to you. He said the world has roughly 7.85 billion people, and that number keeps increasing. The country you were in has I don't know how many, but the city you were in has almost 1 million. Amidst all of these great numbers, I was able to locate a little piece of leather that has your earthly identity. How big do you think I am? How big is this God? And immediately I called my bride that night and I said, we worship an amazing God. He that began this race in us is the only one that can finish it with us. As my bride has often said, when a man of God is doing the work of God, he seems to be immortal till God calls him home. And maybe my time is not young. Maybe I was not designed to be held up there. I was designed to come back and do something more for him. So when you finish this race, when you look at this race, when you're running at this race, remember the word endurance. Look at the race ahead of you and continually look at Jesus, the author and finisher of your faith. God bless.